I think we're gonna go for Hopper next.
Hopper
Nice. That's good. I appreciate that.
What do you reckon, Andreas? Is it possible that Nick is just trying to lull you into a false sense of security here? Do you reckon he's trying to get the naval maps and the rush tactics out, and then he's gonna change gear halfway through?
I mean, I think it's the only explanation that makes sense, to be honest with you. I think he's trying to make me comfortable and lay back, and then he comes in, right? But that's not going to happen, Nick. Should have chosen a better strategy.
Should have chosen a better commander.
Okay.
I mean, rock the beast for one time's sake.
Yeah.
There we go. Come on, don't be ashamed of yourself, Nick. No, you won that fair and square season 1, right? I mean, I know it's a long while ago, but...
What are you doing?
Unbelievable scenes.
Look at that. He's going for the dumpster again.
He's going for the donut commander. What is
boy.
this?
You know, I'd rather lose for the beast commander than going for that donut.
Imagine
That's
if...
fine.
What would you say though if Andreas, if Nick wins with the donut commander, will you don the donut? Or will you be
I mean,
sticking to the beast?
If it's a case of the Orcus getting me, then I'm like, well, he should be ashamed, right? But I mean, it's on him. He can pick whatever commander he wants, but it's Nick for you, right? I'm gonna stand there as a man and use the beast like I'm supposed to, and I'm gonna win regardless, Nick.
Well, you're welcome to try, buddy.
All right. Well,
I'm loving this.
shall we allow money to get put where mouths are?
Yes, well, does the command donut have a mouth? I can't really see.
I don't know. I want to eat that guy.
But, as Roncat says, let's get this game started, folks. Best of luck to you both.
Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck.
Let's take this opportunity to remind viewers...
Game is strong in there.
It's ridiculous. It's, you know, if I didn't have slippers on right now, my feet would be burning with the amount of lava on the floor. But let's take a...
Maybe that's why the trash talk is supposed to go into the trash commander. That's why we've got the trash can commander making an appearance.
Hey. Well,
Yes.
we'll see what happens. But let's remind viewers that these two are playing in a best of 9 series for $1,000. $1,000. And Andreas is currently 2 games up. Last second before we hop in, has our straw poll changed at all? Well, votes have changed a little bit. Still, most people think that Andreas is going to win with a close margin, but one vote now says that Andreas is going to win with a large margin. Interesting.
How are we defining a large margin here? Because in theory, the winner will only win by a single game.
Any three games or more, I would say, is a large margin.
Okay.
So, i.e., Nick can only win 1 game if Andreas were to win by a large margin, for example,
Okay.
or maybe 2 games. 2 games to Nick. So
Yeah. Okay. So are we calling? I guess we call 4-1 would obviously be a large margin. Maybe
Yeah.
4-2.
Yeah,
4-2
I'd
is
say
still a fairly hefty margin.
I'd say 5-2 is as large as close as a large margin is going to get.
Okay. My poor little brain, unfortunately. This is actually a very interesting point for the stream. Casters can't do maths, and if they can, they fail to do it whilst live on stream.
Casters do maths just as well as Ubers do orbital.
There you go. So this is why when you hear us talking in the game, we'll say many of this, many of that, rather than trying to count the things, because inevitably, if you give a number and it's the wrong number, you've missed something somewhere. The viewers will remind you of that for weeks. I've learned that from many years of making that mistake.
I think it goes all the way back to when Metapod was co-casting with us at PAX, wasn't it? It's like 1, 2, many vehicles.
We're just waiting for Andreas to return from wherever he's gone. Bearing in mind he's been gone for about 2 minutes, I can probably guess, but I'm not going to speculate on stream.
Yeah, he might be doing.
We're just as keen to get on with this as you guys are.
Yeah, possibly polishing his beast commander with the blood of Nick from the last 2 games, I reckon. But or shall I say the grease of Nick's commander?
Okay, Andreas is back. Shall we do this?
Let's do this. Kaboom!
flattened pumpkin donut king commander.
Flattened donut
Of
pumpkin
Nick.
king. What is
Yes.
that description? Don't think it bears thinking about.
I think it just about sums up my regard for said commander. All right, so let's have a little look at this map. Marshall, where are the players able to spawn on this one?
The players will be spawning right about here, where we've got our 5 metal on the approach, and our players now just spawning in. So here on the north of Game 3 Hopper, we have Nick in his not Beast Commander. I think maybe he's playing submissively here. And on the south, we have... There we go. AndreasG in purple. 2 games up is Andreas. And starting now, bots into double air, into naval, using a Commander Walk strat over there. And Nick doing the same. Bots into air, into double naval. Previously, I have seen Nick play on this map, running his commander to this central island here, and using that as a staging post for future attacks. What do you reckon they might do here on Cat? What would you do?
Well, I mean, what I would do is probably immaterial, because if I were really good at this game, I'd probably be an Uber myself. As it stands, I'm a fairly mediocre player, reasonable strategist. Strategist, that's the one. I was going to have a statistician there, which is complete...
Statistician.
Anyway, I would be expecting to see the use of air to get across to the second continent fairly early on, because that's free metal there. That's going to be relatively uncontested compared with trying to push forward along this long snaking island here. Any land pushes, particularly by vehicles, is going to be very much sort of pushing against one another at loggerheads for the most part. I'd be looking to try and avoid that. I'd be looking to try and expand and get around to the sides and try and find a nice, soft, squishy part to go and poke.
Soft and squishy. That's how we
This is
like
why
our
I'm
donuts.
not an Uber player.
I think Uber players are allowed to describe things as soft and squishy. But, meanwhile, though, we have our players continuing their builds. We have an Icarus coming out for Nick now. We have a Scouting Firefly for AndreasG on the back of Nick's base, so he can see exactly what's going on. He can see that Nick has gone into the water there with that naval factory. Nick, meanwhile, coming out with those Icarus, and both players expanding towards the 4 in the middle here. So we could have a bit of a tussle, a skirmish on this this little narrow continent here. But I don't see either player making a play for that second continent that you spoke of, Roncat.
Well, that's... By the looks of it, Andreas is looking to basically put himself down into a trench right here on this front line. He's got a factory going up, proxy factories, pushing towards his opponent there. So he's trying to build the units closer to where he thinks he's going to need them. And so by building a factory right there on the front line, that's very much a statement of intent on his part. Meanwhile, both commanders now getting in the sea and building naval factories. Nick's slightly ahead. And once again, we're seeing Andreas's expansion is looking to be a little bit more aggressive than Nick's early game. Now got a little air tussle happening, and Icarus lost, and no tears were shed. Second Icarus gone. We've now got an undefended bomber from Andreas. He's going to take out that fabricator. Is he successful?
Somehow those bombers missed, but that was close. Nick there getting a nice little bit of expansion up onto that hill with that naval fabricator, and also a naval factory on the other side of this. What's the word for this outcropping of land here? What's the geographical term?
Peninsula?
Peninsula. That's the word I was after.
Look at that. Our viewers are getting a schooling in PA and the English language at the same time. A very easy win there for Nick, using the sparks there, the powerful area of effect damage they are able to produce, absolutely mincing the docks of Andreas. That little aggressive push punished. Complete loss for Andreas. Meanwhile, what have we got over here? Back in the sea, Nick has got an Orca steaming straight towards the back of Andreas's base. Meanwhile, Andreas has got an Orca commander and everything else there trying to defend against that. That shouldn't be too much of an issue.
Yeah, it's certainly not going to be a commander boxing game like the last one that there was. So we're going to see a different part of this game. potentially even some naval blockades. We've got a few piranhas coming in from the south here from Nick, picking off at these metal expansions here. And
That must be really irritating because unfortunately that outranges the docks, which he's sending in to try and deal with it. He's actually now managed to send in a piranha of his own as Andreas to try and deal with that threat.
But
Not traded well, though.
These bombers desperately trying to deal with these piranhas, but the piranhas are just too fast. If they were...
That's some good micro there by Nick, trying to preserve those piranhas as long as possible and be as irritating as possible to Andreas's expansion here on the outcrop. More forward factories, though, from Andreas. It's a forward vehicle factory. Vehicles being slow, you try and build them as close to your opponent as possible, and that minimizes the amount of time between building and killing things.
It's good for Nick here that he's managed to take out 2 metal extractors on that peninsula, and Andreas is being kept on this micro front trying to deal with these, rather than worrying about what Nick's doing, which pushing up there, and the naval trades now happening on the other side. So we've got multiple things really starting to happen now, and Nick starting his T2 naval, which...
It's interesting. At this stage, look at the eco game, looking at the aggression, Nick very much on the front foot here. Andreas is having to respond to Nick's moves rather than the other way around, which is nice to see. We have got a little bit of expansion now from Nick on the second continent. Oddly enough, building a vehicle factory. I think he's got queued up as well. Potentially maybe going to build factories on this continent and a teleporter to put them across into his opponent's base. What do you reckon?
That, or he will just try and secure the continent first and then drifter across. That, or possibly T2 naval, T2 air, sorry. Horseflies are pretty beastly, which is rather apt.
We've
for
just
this
seen
tournament.
a buff, haven't we, to drifters with this latest patch. Do you think that that buff is enough to make them viable against a naval force in this situation?
It depends where the naval force is. A consolidated naval force will be enough to overwhelm drifters. I think if it's like 1 orca against, let's say, I don't know, a raiding party of like 5 drifters, the 5 drifters should win out on that one. And I think that's what's going to be crucial in getting to like this 4 mechs expansion on the front here, or even running into the back of the base here in a backwardly direction there.
Interesting development here. Andreas has attempted to expand onto this continent and it has been pushed off by Nick. So we are now seeing very much that this is Nick's game to lose. However, we see that his fabricator over here has been picked off trying to build that vehicle factory. So actually, both players have tried to expand onto that second continent and been thwarted by their opponents. There are no fabricators there on that continent now.
Yeah, Nick having the army advantage and a slight eco advantage, but both players struggling for that metal. Both really need to find some of those sites to expand to, and Andreas finally getting a little bit of expansion on the other sort of canal, as it were, on this side there, which should be able to lock off any aggression from Nick that may come down further on into the game. But we're continuing to see the air trades here. Andreas not microing that air, that was guard radius, and Nick just waltzes in and resets Andreas's air big time. That's pretty good win for Nick right there.
This is interesting. I think we're going to see a lot more T2 in this game. This is going to be a slower game. Both players now realizing the boundaries of their economy. Both of them well below 100% build rate. They're going to start to look at T2, maybe looking at some T2 eco if they're not able to expand as they would like. But this is going to be, I think, a bit more of a T2 heavy game. Certainly both players looking to try and find chinks in their opponent's armor. Nick pushing in with some submarines. I don't see any torpedo defenses. One has just been rushed up. That will be enough to thwart these orcas as they arrive.
Yes, it most certainly will.
Barracudas.
Barracudas, indeed. But both players now have seen the T2 factory of the other. Nick building a Leviathan, meanwhile Andreas building a Typhoon. Andreas doesn't really have the metal count to really make a Typhoon work, I feel, in this instance, and that Leviathan can work both defensively and aggressively as a gradual push into Andreas's naval base here, because look at how much power is in that naval base. That's most of Andreas's energy production sat right there.
I think the Leviathan's probably, as you say, the better bet here, because effectively that gives you a mobile artillery piece. It's not going to sit there and sap your eco in the same way that the aircraft carrier, the Typhoon, is going to do. But now see the Leviathan has been completed, and Nick No, again, Nick is the one who's being aggressive this time. Andreas's vehicle factory built on the front line has been taken out by a raiding force of bots. Very heavy on the sparks is Nick, but he's got, for the most part, the energy to back that up. And that's really, it's very hard to call this game at this stage. We're 10 minutes in now. Both players have been able to deal out some damage to their opponents. The Typhoon has now been completed, and we're about to see a little naval scuffle.
Yeah, I think the naval in the air is really going to be what's deciding this. You can see there the Typhoon launching its drones, but now, with a lack of metal, the drone production has completely stalled. Look at how slow those are going up and coming out. They're not at any decent rate at all. The Typhoon coming in, and down goes the Leviathan, coming in, and down goes the Typhoon. And Andreas now looking a little flimsy on that naval side. And it should also be noted that, as you say, Nick pushed in and got rid of Andreas's vehicle expansion. Andreas pushed in and got rid of Nick's vehicle factory on the other island as well. But it really does all hinge on this navy.
I'm thinking we're about to see death by 1,000 cuts here. The Leviathan is soon to be supported by a Kraken, 2 long-range T2 naval units pushing in on the front line, and another Typhoon being rushed out by Andreas. And as you say, this Air Force here is enough to just pick off the drones as they appear. There's enough fighters here just to kill any drones as they appear, and the Typhoon itself now taking considerable damage at the hands of the Leviathan and the submarines, and he's gone. And there's finally Leviathan being pushed out by Andreas, but is it going to be too late now? That looks like that Leviathan is going to prevent any further production by that T2 factory. Meanwhile, nothing else happening on the land. Both players stalled, their attention focused entirely on this naval confrontation, and rightly so.
Well, Nick can't really push in on the peninsula because Andreas has got a few orcas to defend, but Nick now pushing in and getting his naval coastal bombardment there as well, so we'll probably see those start to push in momentarily. But I wonder whether Andreas might concede beforehand, because let's have a look at the eco game here. Nick's starting to pull ahead, and Nick's army is twice the size. In comes the Kraken, in comes the Stingray, and the Leviathan. That T2 naval factory is going to go down, and that is not going to go unnoticed. And to be honest, that will probably seal the deal, because at that point Andreas has no T2, he hasn't got any factories to deal with the T2, and really, that to me, as far as I can see, is game right there. There's no way that Andreas can get a commander snipe out of the bag here. And there's the GG from Andreas. Down he goes. Wowzer.
There we go. So, for all you naysayers in the audience, Nick has just won his first game of the tournament in quite a spectacular fashion, taking his early opening aggressive rush strats and converting them into a much longer term meta play, and pushing and slowly wearing away his opponent's defenses, finally claiming victory.
Let's pop back to the brackets there where you can see the new score. Andreas 2, Nick now sitting comfortably off the starting square with more games to play momentarily. Let's go and have a chat to them. Hello, hello, hello.
GG.
Well, Nick, you're past go. Congratulations.
Thank you. Though, if I had lost on this one, I would have been pretty miserable, given that it plays to my strengths the most.
And what would you say those are, or are you going to keep those close to your chest since Andreas is in the room?
I think it's pretty obvious. I play well when there's a lot of micro and tactical decision involved. I think strategy-wise, I outplay Andreas most of the time. I think his main strength is just being very aware of large maps. So I honestly expected more of him on the back end this time. But I guess he disappoints from time to time.
And Andreas, how did you feel with the outcome of that game? You never really quite managed to get that T2 naval to work for you. I'm not quite sure that Typhoons were the best option. Well, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think there's really this entire game all come down to the tier 2 naval and how that panned out, and his Leviathan paid for itself. But it's like the tier 2 naval is in a kind of weird place at the moment where Typhoons are really strong if you have air control, which I didn't have. So, but it's all come down. If I trade better against his Leviathan, then suddenly he's an issue. in issues in that central trade there. So.
Well, correction, you had air control. Kind of mismarked your air for quite a while.
Yeah, I said I didn't have it when the Typhoon came out, right?
So ready for the next one? What's your pick, mate?
Yeah, we'll see. Which one should I pick?
You've got a choice between Evac, District, Pax, and Shard.
I guess it's time to go Orbital then. Let's do Pax.
Oh boy,
Oh.
there it is. There we go. Time for 2-2, mate.
I want to play to your weakness, right, Nick? Awareness, wasn't that what you said? I mean, if one planet wasn't enough, I'll give you 5.
Okay, then I'm gonna call in a 5-minute break. Go rehydrate and stuff. Is that okay with streamers?
Yep, that's completely fair. I think that's good for our voices as well. Let's take a 5-minute break, and when we get back, hopefully Nick will use his Beast Commander and not a Command Donut. And now that he's actually won a game and reclaimed a bit of honor.
No honor amongst thieves.
Ooh. Well, you never know. He might steal the next win from you, Andreas. You got to watch out.
He might.
Oh, that's not a might, mate. That's a will.
Like every game, huh?
Am I correct in thinking that the players are very strongly encouraged to leave the initial planet in this particular system?
I've heard mixed things about that. Nick has previously said that this is objectively the best map, quote. He really likes this map, so it's going to be interesting that Andreas has picked what is Nick's favourite map in the current ranked set.